Alright, CNT120, Chapter 2, we're looking at the section on cable management. So after they talk cable infrastructure and kind of all the pieces and parts, they now say, okay, well, with all of this in place, because realistically you're going to deal with hundreds to thousands of data connections. So to do that, I gotta be on my A game and have all this managed well. So let's change gears to cable management now, kind of once it's all in, dealing with it. So, to prevent problems that I might have with my cabling system, I need to make sure that when I'm doing all my terminations, no more than 1 inch of exposed cable before termination. So, as I strip the wire, the jacket off my insulation to terminate, I need to keep this very minimal here, because the more I expose, the more I'm allowing for interference to come in. These wires being twisted together do what's called cancellation. With them being twisted together, any noise that it picks up, it goes into both wires. Well, when it does that, it actually, the magnetic field created around one wire starts to cancel out the magnetic field on the other one. Here is my super quick explanation. If you've ever taken a wire and wrapped it around a nail and hooked it up to a battery, you made a little electromagnet. So there's proof that when you move electricity through a coil of wire, it produces a magnetic field. Okay, so when I start running electricity through a wire, a power cable, it produces a magnetic field. Well, as I have, actually, now let me flip this around real quick. At your power company, think about like a hydroelectric power company. The waterfall, they build a dam and the water comes over the dam, and the water coming over the dam spins a turbine, like a little fan blade, if you will. Well, what it does then is that spinning turbine connects to a coil of wire that is moved inside a magnetic field. When you do that, when you take and move a magnet by a coil of wire, that magnetic field starts affecting the electrons in the coil, and it actually starts grabbing those electrons and throwing them down the wire and producing electricity. So whenever I have a magnetic field moving by a coil of wire, it tries to get those electrons to move and create electricity flow. So if I take those two concepts, moving electricity through a wire produces a magnetic field, and moving a magnetic field by a coil of wire tries to get electricity to move, those two phenomenon happen, I should say, when I have a power cord near a data cable, those two phenomenon are going on. The magnetic field produced around this power cable is actually trying to grab the electrons in the data cable and move them. That's what it's trying to do. So if I have these two data wires here laying next to each other and twisted, those magnetic fields start canceling each other. The electrons that want to try to move this way on this wire get canceled by the electrons trying to move this way on this wire. So having those wires laying next to each other and twisted together kind of cancels those magnetic fields. Alright, that's a good thing. We want that on my cabling. But if I strip off too much insulation and start untwisting my wires for termination, I'm allowing for crosstalk to happen. That is that interference that it picks up from a power cable or something of that nature. Okay, so any kind of termination, I want to make sure that I do not have a lot of wire untwist. I need to keep it nice and tight to the termination point. You know, bad, good. Okay, oops. The second cable management tip they point out was your bend radius. Anytime I run a cable around a corner, I need to make sure it's a nice, gentle bend going around. If I bend it too sharp, I actually start stressing out the copper in here, and I start causing interference in the signal moving around that corner. So they actually give you a guideline of 4 times the cable diameter. That bend radius should be greater than 4 times that cable diameter if it's a copper cable. And that's why, as you see cables going around a corner, it's a nice gentle bend there. After installing my cabling, I should put a cable meter on it and test for continuity, and maybe even additional testing for wire maps and distances and that sort of thing. This eliminates any kind of future failures, or tries to cut down the number of future failures that you might have in your cable system. Anytime I need to bundle my cables, I should be using, more times than not, these Velcro ties, and I'm bundling very loosely. If I do these kind of zip ties, these little plastic ties, I need to make sure they're loose so they do not cut into the insulation or cause that cable to get kinked or bent. I should avoid laying cables across the floor, but if I have to, I need to make sure they're in some kind of cover that they are not stepped on or rolled across on a chair, with a chair that would cut the cable. I need to make sure my cabling avoids power lines and sources of interference, things like fluorescent lights, motors, power lines kind of thing. I need to make sure they're at least 3 feet away from this stuff. If not, the electromagnetic fields produced around these lights and power lines induce noise or put noise into my data lines. If I'm installing cabling in a plenum space, okay, is the space above like a suspended ceiling or below a floor, okay? If I'm installing cabling below a floor down here or above a ceiling, above a suspended ceiling, that's a plenum space. If I install it there, I need to be using plenum-rated cabling. Okay. On the side of the cable, there's a marking. It actually tells you the type of cable and manufacturer and part number and all that jazz. One of the other codes on there actually tells you whether the cabling is plenum rated or not. And more chances than not, it's going to be like an MPP, CMP kind of thing. The P on the end is key indicating plenum rated. Even if it's optical fiber, it would be like OFNP, optical fiber non-conductive P for plenum. Okay. So I'd be looking for plenum-rated cabling. Well, here's a box of ordinary category 6 cable. Says nothing about plenum. Well, the outside jacket would look something like this. Blah, 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 blah. Category 6 patch cable. Well, that's patch cable. It's not designed to be installed in a ceiling. So that insulation there is just plain old PVC or, plastic insulation, if you will, polyvinyl chloride. Plenum-rated cabling. Here's a box of plenum-rated cabling. There it says right there, plenum rating. On the jacket insulation, you would see blah, 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 category 6, blah, 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 CMP. There it is. Communications multipurpose plenum cabling. Well, the plenum-rated cabling, the insulation is made from a special fire retardant PVC or a different type of plastic that is fire retardant and emits less toxic fumes if it were to catch on fire. It's not fireproof, but it emits less toxic fumes that way because that plenum space is an airspace. When installing cabling, pay attention to grounding requirements, grounding and bonding requirements. The equipment rack here itself actually needs to be grounded because if you have a short on a switch or something like that and this rack is metal, it could be dangerous. That needs to actually be grounded so you don't have any issues like that. It also helps get rid of any of your noise in the cabling. That helps get rid of that electrical noise. When I'm terminating cabling, I need to make sure I leave some slack in the cable runs for servicing and or moving cabling. I need to make sure I have a little bit of slack in there if I need to move things around. When I'm installing cabling, I need to make sure it is in trays or sleeves or something like that so it's being supported, protected, and edges aren't cut and that sort of thing. I need to make sure I'm using patch panels to organize my connections. Coming into the back, nice gentle bends, organized, bundled, terminating the back of the patch panel. The front itself then would need to be labeled, that sort of thing. Again, all this is in the name of making sure the cabling is working, it's not going to fail, and if I have to troubleshoot, I can find things and locate things. And actually, here's another type of, this is called a neat patch. The cables themselves do a little loop-de-loop in here. Very organized, very controlled, if you will. Your network manager should specify standards for the type of cabling used in spare parts. So what category cable is everything going to be? Vendors that we get our supplies from. Maybe you have a good reputation with them. You know the vendor. They have good shipping. They have good delivery times or something like that. And maybe a preferred vendor. Maybe a certain brand of outlets and faceplates and jacks and things that you use because you've had better success with terminating those. That should all be documented. I need to also make sure that my documentation of my patch panel is done. And there actually is programs out there that you can take a patch panel, in a computer program and start labeling all the ports what they are. This has to be done so you know where all of these terminations go. And here's other programs that you can label where all the ports and things go, where all the connections go. I can even use spreadsheets to show how my ports are being used. Any way I do it, I need to document where things are going. I need to make sure I label everything, all my cables, all my data ports, all my patch panels, all my connectors. And they actually do make little special printers to help print those labels out for you. And here's even special ones that stick up so they're easy to read. Label, label, label. This is all in the name of keeping the system up and running, and if I have to fix something, finding it quickly so I can fix it quickly. Here's labeling all my data outlets. Here's labeling all my patch panels. Okay. Possibly even using color-coded patch cables for things. I might color code by sections of my building or room of my building. I might even color code based on the type of thing that is connected there. Maybe printers are a certain color, wireless access point is a certain color, user computers a color, IP phone is a certain color, IP camera is a certain color. Okay. Again, that would help with locating things, troubleshooting, repairing, replacing, etc. As always, update documentation. There's programs out there to allow you to draw your equipment racks and label things. Document, document, document. It is tough. It's one of those things you often don't like to do, but it helps with troubleshooting and maintaining. Key. And here's another example of documentation. Yet another example of documentation. Document, document, document. Alrighty, we'll come back to the next one and talk about monitoring our network.